One strike pitch. Swinging a blast toward right center field. Chasing is Harris. Closing. He dives. Can't get it. It goes by him to the wall. Harris gets up. Picks it up on the warning track. Wood will score. Garcia racing for third. He will dive in head first with a triple. It's a one-run game. Atlanta 5, the Nationals 4. Garcia has 3 extra base hits tonight. A double, a homer, and a triple. That's his 5th 3-base hit of the year. The Nationals have the tying run 90 feet away.
Yeah, they did, but they didn't get that tying run in, and they lost 5-4. Garcia was one single away from hitting for the cycle last night. Rough night for Dylan Cruz, who went 0 for 4 and left some base runners on base. Jake Irvin got his first start since May, gave up 5 earned runs in 5 innings, but the Nats lost for the second straight day to drop to 500. 2.5 games out of both wild card spots. Either teams in front of them lost or did not play last night. Another one in Atlanta tonight with the trade deadline looming on Monday. Good morning, everybody. The team is not practicing today. Day 3 of camp is, I was a bit surprised by that. Tomorrow's the first public practice. Today, they are not practicing, so they have the day off. We talked pretty much about day 2 yesterday, the Nick Allegretti reveal from the coach, Dan Quinn, that it's not that serious necessarily. We'll see how long he's sidelined for. Treylon Burks, a little bit of a sore foot as well. We'll see how long he's sidelined for. Those are some of the, right now, storylines to follow in terms of injured players. Of course, we talked yesterday very much so about Stephon Diggs. Overwhelmingly, you guys think the team should sign Stephon Diggs. And I would say that there's probably some interest level. I would hope there's some interest level. And I think the bottom line is that the most likely scenario right now is the money is something that's much different with anybody that Diggs is talking to, not just our team, but any other team. Diggs is probably asking for something closer to what he got last year in New England, 22 to 23 million. And the market probably says now he's worth about 13 or 14 million dollars. The poll yesterday that we put up, our Waldorf Honda X poll of the day, should Stephon Diggs be signed by Washington, yes or no? 82.2% of you said yes. 82.2% of you said yes. So that was impressive. This from my guy Ivan, who called in yesterday. He wrote, Kevin, as your wont, you changed what I said into what you think you heard. Top 5 receiving core, not top 5 duo, which is what you changed it into. He called yesterday to say that Washington's wide receiver core, if Stephon Diggs were added to it, would be top 5 in the league. That was immediate pushback. And Ivan, I would say that core or duo, however you want to go, core is probably worse for Washington, if truth be told, because there's not much beyond that duo of Diggs and McLaurin that we know a lot about right now. But he also included Chig at tight end. But Washington would not have a top 5. They would not have a top 10 receiving core if they added Stephon Diggs. What it would be is improved for sure. There was an actual ESPN, ranking the combo of wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, the skill position players. I think they did that last week. I'll share with you some of what those results were. Meantime, a wide receiver that was still out there and is no longer, Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel signs a 1-year, $7 million deal to go back to San Francisco. I think that was always going to be a possibility with him, but with some of the injuries out there, Pearsall's banged up, obviously no Ayuk. They've got some injuries at that position. They've got an injury at head coach too, but Deebo is returning to San Francisco. Meantime, Chris Olave, did you see the deal he got? 4 years, $132 million, $90 million guaranteed. for Chris Olave. If you want to know why Terry was upset last summer, Terry got $44 million guaranteed. Olave ends up with $90 million guaranteed. Obviously, the age is a big part of that. Olave's really good, too. He really is. If you recall, that was the 2022 draft in which Washington was sitting at 11, traded back with New Orleans so New Orleans could trade up and select Chris Olave. Washington ended up getting Jahan Dotson, Sam Howell, Brian Robinson Jr., and who was the fourth player? Why do I keep forgetting the fourth player? Was it Colson Yankoff?
I was about to say Colson Yankoff. So, yes, I think we're both right here.
Okay. I think it was Yankoff. Okay, so he's left on the roster. And by the way, quite the athlete Yankoff is, and a chance for sure to be a part of the mix this year. That 2022 draft with Drake London going 8, and Olave going 11, Garrett Wilson right before him. Those three receivers have turned out to be pretty good. The fourth receiver taken in that draft, or the fifth receiver taken in that draft, Jahan Dotson, not so much. The sixth receiver in that draft, Treylon Burks. He's on the roster. Washington would have taken Drake London. We talked about it at the time. Scott Turner actually confirmed that with me on the show not too long ago. If Drake London had fallen to 11, they would not have traded back. They would have taken him, but he was gone at 8. Olave was sitting there at 11, and they decided to trade back, to which many of you were thrilled about the move they made and thought it was an absolute steal, the trade. A few years later, Olave is getting $90 million guaranteed because he's a good receiver. He's an excellent receiver. He's got some good size to him. He's got really good separation ability, really good hands. His issue has just been staying healthy. Missed some games his first year, second year, and third year. Last year played for the majority of the season and was a second-team All-Pro with the Saints, with Tyler Shuck playing really well at the end of the year. I really like the Saints going into this year. I think that is a team that absolutely could create some havoc. All right. Ben will join us at 12. Let me get to it. What do you got? So we haven't talked about this. I think I saw it yesterday during the show, and I missed it from, I guess, the night before. Paige Beckers, she is a WNBA player. She played at Connecticut, if you recall, and was part of some championship teams with Gino Auriemma. She was the first player picked in the WNBA draft in 2026. One of the young stars of the WNBA. She plays currently for the Dallas Wings in the WNBA. Paige Beckers and Angel Reese. I think most of you know who Angel Reese is. Angel Reese was obviously a star player in college when her LSU teams went head-to-head with Caitlin Clark's Iowa teams. She actually started at Maryland, where her younger brother, Julian Reese, Juju Reese, was a 4-year standout. And now, by the way, Juju is a member of the Washington Wizards. Played pretty well at the end of the regular season last year. Paige Beckers and Angel Reese were both All-Stars, and they were at the All-Star game over the weekend. And they placed a bet with one another for $400. It was videotaped, the two of them making this bet, whereby the next time they played, which was on Wednesday night, the winner of the game would win $400 and would be paid by the losing player in the game. This was a straight-up friendly wager between two WNBA players. It may have been lighthearted. It may have been in fun. But it was a bet in which Angel Reese actually, after her team won the game, said that, I'll be requesting my Apple Pay after this game. And then she hashtagged a post on social media with cuatrocientos, as in 400 in Spanish, after the game. So the WNBA thought it was cute because they are a brilliant league, and they posted it on their own social media. You can't make this up. They actually posted it on their own social media. Look at how fun this is that two of our players are wagering on a game that they'll be playing against each other. I mean, you'd literally need to have been asleep for the last 10 years not to know that that would generate negative attention, that is a no-no. Doesn't matter how much money these leagues are taking from gambling outfits. It is strictly prohibited to gamble on sports, especially your own sport. According to the WNBA's rules, any player found by the commissioner after a hearing to have been guilty of wagering directly or indirectly, or of offering or attempting to wager money or anything of value on the outcome, score, or any other aspect of any WNBA competition shall, in the sole discretion of the commissioner, be subject to fine, suspension, and or dismissal and disqualification from any further association with the NBA. They posted it on the league's social media Twitter account, this bet. You can't make up how stupid this league is. You cannot make up how badly this league has damaged itself over and over again with respect to trying to make money, because they didn't for 27 years. They were funded by the NBA for 27 years, supported, held up, kept alive until one player, Caitlin Clark, arrived. Now, the WNBA acknowledged yesterday that the post, quote, missed the mark, close quote. I'll read you the entire statement. While the social media post was intended to be lighthearted, WNBA players are well aware of the league's policies prohibiting betting on WNBA games and receive training every year reinforcing those policies. We recognize that the post missed the mark, removed it shortly after it was published, and addressed the matter internally. Close quote. Yes, I do remember the Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels friendly wager about the Giant game. I do. And that was frowned upon significantly. By the way, the WNBA did not decide to enforce any level of punishment against either player. You do wonder about whether or not, if actual money exchanged hands, if that would have flown in any other league. But that was the outcome. They decided not to punish either player. They just apologized for it, said they missed the mark, and you move on. Who in their right mind posts something like that? It's one thing for the players to do it because they thought it was lighthearted. They're having fun. They could be somewhat naive, somewhat ignorant. They shouldn't be. They shouldn't be to the rules in their own sport when it comes to gambling. Yeah, not the best look for the WNBA. The league continues to step all over itself with respect to certainly Caitlin Clark for starters, now Sophie Cunningham. The Caitlin Clark thing, Tommy told me yesterday that, and I really like Monica McNutt a lot. I think she's actually really good as a basketball analyst. We've had her on the show before. She went to Georgetown. She grew up in the area. Apparently, she made a remark that drew a lot of, drew quite the response both ways on social media, saying that Caitlin Clark, it's time for her to step up and be accountable to the sisterhood of the WNBA. And I would just respectfully disagree and say, accountability, she has been accountable and responsible for across the board increases in salaries for every player in the league, across the board revenues for every team in the league, across the board profitability for the first time in the league's history. She's accountable for the new way in which WNBA teams travel. They travel much more luxuriously than they ever have after she arrived. They didn't always fly private. Now they do. She's been accountable to the sisterhood of the league. If this league understood that the balance sheet of the league is rather important and they actually knew how to read it, they would put a crown on Caitlin Clark's head and call her the queen of the sisterhood and make sure that she's never uncomfortable while carrying the weight of the entire league on her back. This league is truly ridiculous. With that said, I've watched more, only her games when they're on. And I think they play again tonight. I think so. Don't hold me to that. And she's really good. I mean, when she came into this league 2 years ago, people weren't sure how good she would be. She's really good. I mean, I'm not a WNBA expert, clearly, admittedly, but I would think that she's one of the top 5 players in the game now. She may not be Asia Wilson. She may not be one or two other players in terms of all around, but every night you see that she's setting some sort of new standard when it comes to combined points and assists. She's outstanding. She's obviously a top 10 player in the league. I mean, somebody can correct me on that. I can't imagine that she's not in the MVP voting right now. Max, pull up the MVP odds for the WNBA. I don't know if she's the favorite, but I would have to think with the season she's having, she's in the top 2 or 3.
She remains behind Asia Wilson, Paige Beckers, and Olivia Miles. Caitlin Clark is 13-1.
So what's that, the 4th best odds?
Yes, 4th best odds.
Do they have an all WNBA first team at the end of the season, second team, et cetera?
That's a great question. I think so.
I would think so.
Yeah, they do have all WNBA team. Projected first team contenders include Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Olivia Miles, Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson.
I'd really like anybody that is a legitimate WNBA fan right now. I'm actually super curious about this. Anybody that is a WNBA, fan and follows the league. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. I want to know where she ranks right now in the league. Is she an obvious top 5 player? To me, there's no way you can be second in scoring. I'm looking it up right now. She's 4th in scoring. She's 2nd in assists. She's tied for 4th in 3-pointers made. And where is she on the steals list? Because I think she gets a lot of steals. I don't see her in the top 10 of the steals list. 301-230-09. Where is Caitlin Clark? Like, is she a top 5 player, top 10 player? I mean, 2 years ago, there was legitimate questions. There are always questions about college players and how they'll play against grown men or grown women. It's a different level. I mean, the NBA is a far different level than men's college basketball. And the same is the case with the WNBA. I would like to know from anybody that really knows the WNBA if she is like a legitimate top 5 superstar in the sport. I mean, I know that she's had these runs of games of points and assists combined that have never been matched. She had 32. What'd you say? All right, Skip. Skip, actually, I trust, too. Skip, go ahead.
So, Kevin, I've been a fan, just to let you know, for about 25 out of the 30 years of the WNBA. I mean, I actually have been a fan of women's basketball since the Terps used to have some great
Chris Weller
teams. Yeah.
Chris Weller, yeah.
Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So,
powerhouse they were, and they still are with Brenda.
And so I've been a fan, of women's college basketball, and then that transferred over to the WNBA. So I'm a huge Caitlin Clark fan. When she first burst on the scene from her freshman year to her senior year, a huge fan.
You're really teasing this out. You're drawing this out. I'm hanging on every word here.
You are right in the sense that she definitely has the talent to be a top 5 player. However, due to injuries last year in particular, right. I think her first year she lived up to the talent, to the expectations, even though she faded in the latter part of the year. But she put up some impressive numbers. And she was certainly in the top 5 to top 10 range her first year. Last year, she was mostly.
I mean, they didn't include her on the Olympic team, so that was kind of crazy. Forget the fact that she would have generated literally tens of millions of dollars in jersey sales. But remember, the argument was she wasn't one of the best 20 players in worthy of it.
So you think she was as a rookie? 15? Is it 12 or 15? It's 15.
It was like 20 to make the squad to travel, and then they would pare it down, or what? I forget what it was. So where is she now, Skip?
Yeah. Okay. So last year she was hurt. She was mostly hurt. So right now, due to her last 10 games, because before the last 10 games, she was not having a good season, and there was a lot of questions about her. She was hurt. She had some recurring injuries. And she just had a burst of production in the last 10 games that has put her back.
Well, I'm looking at the log. She missed some games, no doubt, with injury. But the third game of the season, she had 32 and 10. All right. She in the first month of the season, she was averaging 20. Well, it doesn't break it down by month like it does with the NBA for some reason, but it looks like somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 plus a game and right around 8 assists a game.
What were her shooting percentages? They were way down, especially three-pointers.
That's true. Her three-point shooting percentage was not good early. But look, I mean, the stretch we talked about. We talked about on the show the game she had against Seattle, the 45 and 10 in 29 minutes was insane.
That was in the last 10 games, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Her last 5 games, she's averaging something like 33 a game or something like that.
She should be what? WNBA Player of the Week for those type numbers, right?
Yeah, and her shooting percentage, to your point, is way up from the field and from 3.
And one of the other criticisms of her game even in her first year, she broke a record for most turnovers.
Well, she also probably has a very high usage rate, I'm guessing.
That's correct. But so there are holes in her game that clearly A'ja Wilson is maybe the best player ever when she retires in WNBA history. Okay, so she's number 1 by a mile, like John Thompson used to say. Well, number 2 is way down.
Skip, I didn't watch a WNBA game until Caitlin Clark came into the league. And when they played, A'ja Wilson plays for Vegas, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And they played. I remember watching that game and hearing about A'ja Wilson, and I'm like, well, there's nobody like her in this league. She to me, when I've watched her, looks obviously like the best player in the league. So after her, where does Caitlin Clark fit in? Is she top 5?
Well, up until the last 10 games, she was not.
Is she a top 5 player in the WNBA right now?
Talent-wise, in terms of her shooting and passing ability.
Is she going to make the WNBA first team, all WNBA?
Based on the last 10 games, yes. But she has to continue it for the rest of the season.
Well, I would imagine the other 4 players kind of have to continue with that, except for A'ja Wilson. So Paige Beckers is a better player than Caitlin Clark, better all-around player?
I do not think so. I think as far as assists and range, the range that Caitlin Clark has is superior, and her assists, her vision is
and her passing is sensational.
It's, I think, number 1. She's the best passer in the WNBA by a large margin, I would say. But her high turnovers is a negative.
I see that. I see the high turnover rate right now.
Her shooting range is ridiculous, and she just has to have a high percentage. And then you're talking top 5 for sure. Okay, and a threat to be. Player of the year, maybe behind A'ja Wilson.
Right. She's basically got like a 1.7 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. Not good enough. She turns the ball over too much, but her turnovers are the lowest of her 3 years. I know she didn't play a lot last year. I understand. Her shooting percentage is the highest of her 3 seasons, both field goal percentage and 3-point shooting percentage. Free throws, she shot over 90% as a rookie. She's at 87.3% right now. The assists are at 8 right now. She was at almost 9 assists per game last year and 8.5 as a rookie. All right, so you've got her right there on the fringe of being a top 5 player. That's all I wanted to know. I didn't know if I was way off.
Let me just say this. Talent-wise, she's a top 5 player.
Yeah.
Okay. She just has to stay healthy. You know, we always say that about players, their availability. She's a question mark.
Here's that when leave Skip on. I know we got to get to a break, but Tommy and I were having this conversation on my podcast yesterday, and I'm a big fan of Caitlin Clark's. Everything about her, off the court, the way she handles herself, on the court. But the one thing I have noticed, she does bitch and whine about calls a lot.
And Kevin, I know you hate that. She was getting a reputation as being the Luka.
She does. She's got some Luka in her, no doubt. I mean, and it's not always just for her. She's really in there for her teammates when she thinks a bad call's been made. Now, she's gotten the crap kicked out of her too, over and over again during these 3 years without, a lot of protection, without a lot of calls. I mean, that's, part of what I just don't understand about this league. But she does complain a lot. I mean, the other night when they were playing Seattle, I actually watched that game. I mean, she is constantly chirping, constantly. But anyway, all right. The other thing I would say is, Skip, am I right? She's not. She's a bit too slow-footed to be a good defender. She doesn't appear to me to be a really good defender. I would play more zone with her on the floor. I don't know why they don't.
Her defense is not that good, even though she's gotten a little better since her first year.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for helping out. Really appreciate that. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. G from the shop wanted to weigh in on the Caitlin Clark discussion. I know you pay attention to this league. So was Skip right? Is she right there on the fringe of top 5?
Yeah, definitely on the fringe. Skip went too far into it, Kevin. Because, this basketball, this ain't rocket science, man. We ain't got to do no deep dive. Shawty can dribble the basketball. She can run a team. She can shoot the cover off that joint. Like you said, you're going to have high turnover rates, man, when you handle the basketball so much. She makes her team better. She ain't scared to mix it up. You talk about she chirps a lot. All the great players chirp a lot. Michael Jordan chirped a lot. Kobe chirped a lot. They call LeBron a crybaby. Luka does what he does, man. She earned that right. And she brings that star power. Like you said about the Olympic thing, you want to boost WNBA profits? That was stupid, but I understood why, because it was a sending Diana Taurasi farewell tour. She had that roster spot, so I wasn't mad at that. And for Skip to say Asia Wilson is the best player ever, that's blasphemy when you got players like Cheryl Miller who paved the way, Cheryl Swoops, man, Cynthia Cooper, man. And I just said, in my opinion, Diana Taurasi is the best female basketball player I ever seen play in my life, point blank, period. But, man, you got to bring up the young ladies that's doing it in the WNBA right now. Jackie Young, Asia Wilson both play with the Aces. They got the best record in the league. Man, Breonna Stewart doing it at 31, 32 years old. He got more rings in college than people got engagements. You know what I'm saying? So, man, I always been tuned in. But when it comes down to it, he can straight play basketball, flat out.
I'm looking at a list right now of the top 10. This was, it's a Bleacher Report thing. Top 10 WNBA players of all time. And Asia Wilson's number 1, followed by Diana Taurasi, Lisa Leslie, Tamika Catchings, Cynthia Cooper, Maya Moore, who I think is Caitlin Clark's favorite player.
Got to be on that list.
Cheryl Swoops, Brianna Stewart, Lauren Jackson, and Sue Bird. That's your top 10.
No, that's not my top 10 because
I know that.
Coming from this area, Nikki Teasley coming from this area, she was one of the first players in the WNBA. And I'm not being sexist, but I always been a fan of them young ladies that play like dudes. And I'm not trying to be sexist, but don't you
think I know what you're saying. Don't you think Asia Wilson is just I haven't watched her as much as you have, but I've watched her enough, and you know how much I love ball. She jumps off the screen. It's like, it's so obvious how much bigger, stronger, and more skilled she is than almost everybody on the floor when she's on the floor. Yeah, but you rewind back to when the Minnesota Lynx was winning championship after championship. I can't
remember. They had big Sylvia Fowles. Some years ago, they had big Sylvia Fowles, and they had my sister from Ox Hill, Rebecca Brunson. Rebecca Brunson, coming from Ox Hill, Maryland, had 5 WNBA rings, and she would have
That's your
Asia
real
Wilson
sister.
That bump. Not my blood, but, my father drove her home numerous times because her brother played on my AAU team. That's my sister. Right. You understand what I'm saying?
What about Cheryl Miller? I don't see her on any of these top 10 lists that I'm looking through.
Because you got to remember, she didn't play in the WNBA.
Oh, right. Okay. You're right. Yeah, I'm sorry. So would she?
No, but Cheryl Miller.
Yeah.
Cheryl
I know.
Miller
I remember how.
The way
Yeah.
No, and remember them USC teams. She had the McGee twins on there. She had Cooper on there. Man, what we doing here, Skip? Talking about Asia Wilson is the greatest player. And, man, you better put some respect on
I've just
them
pulled
young
up
ladies,
3 lists of the greatest WNBA players of all time, and Asia Wilson's number 1 on all 3 of those lists.
And
just so you know.
That's understandable. But, she's and like I said, that's respect to her. She is dominating. Her team got the best record. They got numerous rings. When her and Bam Adebayo are gonna make a cyborg baby, that might be the next go.
So are they married? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they dealing with each other. I don't know their marital status because I mind my own business, but I know they dealing with each other.
You do.
And when I look at the measurements, Pause.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, they can make a Terminator.
What, is Asia Wilson 6'4" or taller?
6'4", 6'5", legit.
Yeah.
But
wow.
See, this the thing. I thought Candace Parker, in my honest opinion, with the same type of measurements, Ace Candace Parker is.
I like her. She's
more
great on TV.
Oh no, because super high IQ. When you've been around basketball and you really soaked it in, you know how to speak this game. Unlike Skip, and I love Skip, but this is basketball, and when you can relate this thing to the person,
stop going after Skip.
Sport,
leave Skip alone,
Skip, man. No, I love Skip, but I took umbrage with saying Asia Wilson is the greatest female basketball player, and all the female basketball players that came before her are rooting for G from the shop right now.
All right. Well, you're battling for the players from years ago, starting with one Cheryl Miller, who I remember her being quite the player. Who's the greatest Terp of all time? Who's the greatest Maryland player of all time?
Which one, female or
female? Come, you think I can't have a conversation about the men's team?
In my opinion, it's a tie. You got to give it to Christy Tolliver and Marissa Coleman, because Christy Tolliver wouldn't have been open to make them type of big time shots she made without the all Met Player of the Year coming from DC, Marissa Coleman.
I'll go with Vicky Bullitt. Played some pickup games with Vicky Bullitt.
They brought a championship to College Park.
Yeah,
shout out Brenda.
All right, I got to go. Thank you.
Love you, Sheehan.
This has been riveting for the first 40 minutes of the show. All WNBA. I actually think a lot of the stories on the WNBA are fascinating, but the biggest one to me is they got to get the adults into the room. I mean, Adam Silver's got to get some of those owners. They got to fire Kathy, whatever her name is, the commissioner. She's a horrible communicator. They've got to explain how business works. These top line revenues are really important. Like generating revenue is really important for the league, and whatever generates the most revenue, we need to prop that up over and over again. That'll be great for everybody. And that starts with Caitlin Clark for sure. Man, educational with Skip and G this morning. Asia Wilson is the number one player of all time on all these lists, but Cheryl Miller didn't have a chance to play in the WNBA, right? Because it started after she was done playing basketball. I'm assuming that's the reason why. All right, let's talk some. Mark in Largo wants to weigh in. Does he? For real?
I actually wanted to weigh in if you was talking about the NFL, but I could wait. I let the WNBA crew help in what they're doing. I actually wanted to weigh in.
Okay, we're gonna put Mark on hold, and when we get back to some calls on football, we'll get Mark on the line. I do want everybody to know that all of our WNBA conversation here on the show today on Team 980 is presented by Xfinity. Score the most reliable Wi-Fi. One price, 5 years guaranteed. Xfinity. Imagine that. We'll get to our team next hour. Ben will join us at 12. So Baker Mayfield feels disrespected with the offer that Tampa Bay made to him. If you're not aware, Baker Mayfield is entering the final year of what was a 3-year, $100 million deal a few years ago. It was, by the way, in the moment, some thought kind of nuts after he had just played, a little bit for the Rams. But anyway, he's played well. The Bucs have played well. Last year, he was banged up. The team was banged up. They ended up limping to the finish line, and they missed the playoffs by a tiebreaker, a division tiebreaker. Carolina won the division, the NFC South, with an 8-9 record, tied with Tampa Bay at 8-9. Baker Mayfield has been negotiating like Vita Vea has in Tampa. Tampa's an interesting team this year because I think this is a win and win sort of big for Todd Bowles, or they end up moving on from him finally. And I'm a big Todd Bowles fan. So on some level, I'd love to see him have a good season. They can't have a good season without Baker Mayfield. These quarterbacks are hard to find. Baker Mayfield wanted to get paid like a top 10 quarterback. The contracts in the league are just insane. The top 12 contracts on an average annual right now are north of $50 million a year. Jalen Hurts is 12th at $51 million a year. The top paid quarterback on average in terms of average annual is Patrick Mahomes at $63 million per year. The quarterbacks in order of average annual: Mahomes, Prescott, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford. Burrow, Lawrence, Love, and Stafford all are at the same $55 million average annual. Jared Goff is 8 at $53 million. Purdy also tied at 8th with Goff at $53 million. Then Justin Herbert at 10th at $52.5, Lamar Jackson at $52, and Jalen Hurts at $51 million. By the way, Deshaun Watson's still making $46 million a year in Cleveland. Jeremy Fowler had some good reporting on this. The Bucs offered Mayfield 2 years, just north of $100 million. Mayfield was not happy with the years. He wanted more years. He wanted a contract comparable to Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, and Brock Purdy in the $53 to $55 million per year with more years. And Mayfield spoke about it yesterday, was not happy at all. And the negotiations apparently are off, and he'll play the final year of his deal. This is what he said.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've told you guys I've been pretty upfront and honest about my feelings about Tampa. It being home for now our family. We're raising kids here. We love it here. I wanted the deal done and set the deadline and told them it was going to be all ball after that. And I did mean that. And I don't know if they thought I was just going to take some of the offers that they gave, but I'm at the point of my career and understanding what I've brought to this franchise. One, I'm very, very thankful for the chance they gave me. Do not get me wrong on that. But I've also I really know what I've brought to this franchise, leadership-wise, and even play-wise. It's been some of the best years of my career, and I think it's only going to trend upwards, just being comfortable and feeling that. So disappointing in that regard to not have, to feel disrespected a little bit. And that's really the disappointing part, to feel undervalued after, thinking you've earned it. This is not a poor me thing. There's a lot of other people that have it way worse off, but I can sit here and look at other quarterbacks and peers and evaluate myself based on that and put myself in certain categories that I deserve to be compensated for that. And I think I'm a franchise quarterback. I've been told I'm a franchise quarterback. It's been said publicly from ownership down here. And so to not have a deal done is very disappointing. But I said the deadline was a deadline, and I addressed the team to let them know I meant that. It's all ball. I'm with these guys. I think all the guys that have been here know exactly who I am. The guys that are new here, I wanted to address that because they might have had a notion prior to coming here about who I am as a person. But it's all team. It's all about winning here now and what we're going to do. And hopefully Vita gets his back fixed and gets his deal done. I mean, he's the second longest tenured Buck behind CG, and Vita deserves that. He's the anchor of our defense, and so I hope they take care of him.
I read those quotes, and it really goes to show you that tone is so important. Delivery is so important, because in reading Baker Mayfield's quotes about feeling disrespected and being disappointed and feeling undervalued after you think you've earned it, it reads much differently than it sounded right there. He does. That sounded like a very professional answer to me. He was being skewered on social media by a lot of people, and then I watched Get Up this morning, and some of the guys there were beating up on him a little bit, saying, "Look, you're not a top 10 quarterback. You shouldn't get paid like a top 10 quarterback. You shouldn't air this kind of thing publicly." I thought he did a good job there, actually listening to it. Really does make a big difference. The tone of it, I thought that sounded very professional from him. I don't think he is a top 10 quarterback. In that top 10 ranking of quarterbacks, the ESPN thing, as voted on by the 6 dozen or so general managers, scouts, coaches, etc. He basically was the 15th ranked quarterback in the NFL. He was on that honorable mention list. And some of the guys that he wants to get paid like are younger and are ranked ahead of him. I think Baker Mayfield is not a top 10 quarterback in my opinion, but he's definitely a top half of the league starter. And that's where the people had him, right there in the middle of the pack. And so the middle of the pack for a quarterback that's turning or is 31 years old, is probably somewhere around 45 to 50 million a year. He wants more years. They offered him more than 50 for 2 years, and he felt disrespected by that. These things are always interesting. It's the amount of guaranteed money. For a player like Baker Mayfield, the chances on a 2-year deal that he's not going to be in Tampa for the 2 years is pretty slim. But the north of 50 would have put him right where Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson are, and above Deshaun Watson, somewhere in that 11 to 13 range. But he wanted more years. So next year's franchise tag is 50 for quarterbacks, $50.3 million. So if you're Tampa, that's one of those situations where it's like, we don't have a young quarterback anymore, but 31's not old. That position can play another 7-8 years. We know that. I mean, look at Matt Stafford. Look at some of the performances recently by older quarterbacks. But it's not, it's at 31, the way he plays, he takes a beating. Baker Mayfield takes a beating, as a guy that just is constantly trying to compete to get the extra yard. He's going to probably have to back off some of the way he plays, although watching that quarterback Netflix series, I don't think there's any way you could get him to back off the way he plays. He's just super competitive on all the time. He is high strung. He is very high strung, even though that didn't sound very high strung. The Netflix series kind of showed that practice wise and during the game. But I guess, Tampa could go down that path of, okay, well, negotiations are off. We can always franchise him next year at $50 million. That'll save us a lot of money. The problem is when you get to that second year of a franchise tag. I would bet you at some point Baker Mayfield signs a long-term deal. Here's the other thing, too. There's a lot of talk about next year's quarterback class. Now, I would not get excited about, if I were a team in need of a quarterback, I would not get excited because this past year, Arch Manning and Garrett Nussmeier and Klubnik at Clemson were all supposed to be first-round picks. College football is just as unpredictable as the NFL in many ways, especially when you're projecting the draft a year out. So next year's class of Arch Manning, et cetera, and there's a long list of quarterbacks, and so teams like the Jets and Arizona and some of these teams that will be in dire need of a quarterback, they're going to probably wait it out for the draft. It could change, and the draft could look like it did this year, because this time last year, the draft was supposed to be loaded in quarterbacks. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. next year's class supposed to be loaded in quarterbacks. We'll see how it works out. But what the point of bringing that up is, if that quarterback draft is loaded, the opportunities for Mayfield as a free agent aren't like vast. I mean, he gets signed, obviously, and is a starter somewhere. But those teams, more likely than not, would be shooting for the next, young player. Interesting situation in Tampa for sure, because that team needs to win. There's some pressure on Todd Bowles to get it done after last year. And look, they had won multiple division titles in a row and almost won a third division title. They had a 3-game lead in that division and blew it last year. I think defensively they look really, really good, especially if Vea is healthy and plays. All right. Our team next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So Deebo Samuel signed a 1-year, $7 million deal in San Francisco. Really, the only receiver out there that could be added to our team's roster would be Stephon Diggs. We talked about that yesterday. They certainly tried in the offseason to add receivers. They were very interested in Alec Pierce. He ended up re-signing in Indianapolis. They were interested in Romeo Doubs. He ended up signing with the New England Patriots. Washington did add De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson. They drafted Antonio Williams. They kept Treylon Burks. But still, that obviously looks like an area in which you've got Terry McLaurin and then a lot of mystery. Look, I think you can make the case that with Terry 2 years since he last played at a high level, not his fault, injuries, and then last year not out there with a lot of the other players that he was out there with in 2024. But he could be a bit of a mystery. Are we going to get the best of Terry, or are we going to get a slightly diminished Terry? I personally think we're going to get the best of Terry because of the kind of pro that he is. I think we're going to get the best of Terry. And obviously, a lot of Terry's results will be contingent on the rest of the offense being healthy and the new coordinator being the right choice. The question that I want to ask to all of you, and the reason I opened up with a wide receiver, is I think that this is going to be a very popular answer. What I want to ask all of you, we've focused a lot on positives for the most part. Give me the thing that could end up making Adam Peters and the front office look the worst. Something that could happen this year with the team that could end up making the front office look the worst. I shouldn't just say Adam Peters. I should include Dan Quinn because there have been a lot of decisions made. This was a very active team in the offseason. They added more new players than any team in the league. Number one in the league with new player additions to the roster. We'll see what it looks like when we get to the 53. They like to call it the 70 because you can add up to 17 to the practice squad. But the final 53 are still going to more likely than not because most of the new additions were free agent additions on defense, free agents additions on defense that they are expecting to contribute. But what could make at the end of the season, or maybe at any point during the season, what could make the front office look the worst? I mean, beyond just terrible results or terrible performance. I think that even though I would acknowledge that they tried, and by the way, it's very possible that a certain gentleman that used to play in the Bay Area who now apparently has a $10 million house in Loudoun County, he could have been a part of their plan at some point. I think that they were certainly interested before the last month and a half. I am giving them credit. I know some of you don't. I am giving them credit for trying to add higher quality wide receivers, more speed, Pierce, Dobbs, etc. And they just didn't get it done there. Now, we'll see what the third-round pick Antonio Williams means. We'll see how Carnell Tate ends up playing in Tennessee, because that could have been the pick at number 7 had he been there. And they could have said, look, we tried with the with free agency. We just couldn't get a deal done, but we're delivering here with our favorite player in the draft at a position of need. I think that even though I would acknowledge that they tried to create a better supporting cast offensively at the wide receiver position for the offense, for David Blau, for Jaden Daniels, I think the thing that the front office is at most risk of in terms of being truly skewered by the fan base is if it becomes really obvious that the wide receivers just aren't high enough caliber. Like, God forbid some of the injuries happen at wide receiver again, and let's just say Terry were to go down. the lack of frontline starters and then, of course, depth would certainly be an area in which the front office would really take a beating. I did not beat up on anybody in this offseason for last year. I just don't know how you can. Unless somebody told me, hey, man, their practice, the way they train, the way the doctors and the training staff, dealt with these injuries, I don't know how you evaluate the team last year with all of their top line players missing parts of, if not the majority of the season. That, to me, isn't on them. But the wide receiver room last year and the wide receiver room this year, on paper, doesn't look great. And if it doesn't work out, this is the area in which I think the front office will look the worst if it doesn't deliver at a level that is acceptable enough. I mean, if Jaden's sitting back there and nobody's getting open with a decent scheme, and that puts him into a position where he's at more risk because he's extending and he's running more. This is the area, I think, that the front office has the most public scrutiny risk, the wide receiver room. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. There are other answers. I mean, the coordinators, the defense overall. I mean, you can not say anything other than they went all in on trying to fix their defense. Okay, maybe they didn't land superstar. They didn't get Trey Hendrickson. They weren't able to trade for Myles Garrett. The Rams pulled that off. But they've added 6 to 7 new starters on defense and probably 8 to 9 new contributors. And they're going to be getting a couple of players who were injured last year back as well in Armstrong and Wise. But you could say, look, what if that defense isn't significantly improved? Who's that going to fall back on? I think the biggest risk to the front office going into this season is the area of the team that has really drawn as much conversation as any other area of the team. And that is the wide receiver room specifically, not the tight end room, not even the running back room. I don't have any issue with what they did in the running back room. I'm fine with their running back room. I'm actually bullish, optimistic about Rachaad White. I actually liked Katron Allen. He was one of the backs I talked about before the draft. I liked both of the Penn State backs, Singleton and Allen. I liked Allen more, though. I think he could be a really good runner. I still like Krosky Merritt. Maybe not as much as some of you, but I think he showed something last year for sure. So I like the running back room. Obviously, they're not going to be, at risk of criticism because of a backup quarterback. They have arguably one of the 3, 4, 5 best backup quarterbacks in the game in Marcus Mariota, and they re-signed him. I like what they did at tight end. I think the offensive line, the center conversation, there's an area they could be at risk ultimately if it doesn't pan out. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The thing that could make the front office look the worst when we get to the latter portion, if not the end of the season. I'll go with the wide receiver room. Again, want to be clear on this. I'm not trying to make friends with anybody. I'm just saying I know that they tried to do more. You can say, well, trying doesn't have anything to do with it. You got to land Alec Pierce. You got to land Romeo Doubs. You got to sign Stephon Diggs. I mean, now. That's and by the way, if they add Diggs, then they become less, at risk for criticism about an area about that area of the team. All right, 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open, 301-230-0980. The thing that could make the front office look the worst, I would add just front office and even the coaching, because some of you will say it's the coordinators that Quinn had a lot to do with. I mean, Durante Jones is a big hire for Dan Quinn. That's a big hire. It's got to work out. But then the personnel's got to work out too. Phone lines open 301-230-0980. Don't forget you can watch this show on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button when you get there. Also, if you listen to this show as a podcast long after it's over, later in the day or at night or the next morning, rate and review the podcast if you're listening to it on Apple and Spotify in particular. That helps us out a lot. Following the podcast, hit the plus button and the follow button. That's a big deal for us as well. My guy KJ, Kevin Jones, who is a big fan, lives out in the Bay Area. What is the plan if Terry gets injured in season? Front office will look like absolute fools if that happens. Yes, that's the segment we're doing right now. What's the thing that will make the front office look like fools? And I don't want to just include Adam Peters because I think the coordinators are part of that. And Quinn had a lot to say, certainly on the defensive coordinator. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What's the thing that will make the group at large, the decision makers in Ashburn, look the worst if things don't sort of unfold the way they want them to? I will stick with what I think has been really the number one conversation of the offseason, or certainly top three, and that is a wide receiver room that on paper doesn't look great. Terry McLaurin, and then what? And the rookie contract that Jaden's under, and the idea of getting him more help here in year three, you still haven't gotten that wide receiver room exactly right. You haven't gotten it to the level that I think most fans would have thought you would have gotten that wide receiver room to. Again, they tried. Alec Pierce was a top target. Romeo Dobbs was a number 2 target. Those two players decided to stay in Indy in Pierce's case and sign in New England in Dobbs's case. They did add Chigakonkwo. He was one of the top tight ends on the market. They added Van Jefferson and brought back De'Ami Brown and drafted a receiver in the 3rd round. And again, Carnell Tate could have been the selection at number 7. I think Brandon Ayuk 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, 2 months ago, was definitely on the table as a possibility. I don't think he is anymore. I would hope that Stephon Diggs is on the table currently. That could, by the way, change the way we feel about how they've addressed the wide receiver room if they were to get a deal done with Stephon Diggs. I'll tell you what, Stephon Diggs would be, in terms of the newcomers, he would be the guy that would provide the most juice for fans. He would be legitimately anticipated in terms of his debut. And you go into Philly week 1 in a 425, national TV Fox spot, same in week 2 at Dallas. You kind of want some veteran players out there that have been there, done that. I would like to see them sign Stephon Diggs, but I would say out of the areas that they're at most risk of taking the biggest beating, the wide receiver room is number 1. What do you say, Max?
All right, so I have been fielding calls on this, and the lines are full, jam-packed. No one said this, though. The center position. Nick Allegretti, they like you said earlier in the week, Dan Quinn and Adam Peters at their presser were the most convicted in any of their answers about Nick Allegretti. And then immediately the next day, he suffers a calf strain in practice. Now, I think JP said yesterday, like, if he's our starting center by preseason, this could all go away. And I'm completely with him there. But this is an area where they have kind of painted themselves into a corner, and it has to work. Otherwise, you have no depth at center, and you're SOL. You're screwed. Like, especially, it's the captain of your offensive line. That is where all the communication is coming from. So I really think that center is going to be a lot bigger of a deal than people are giving it credit for here at the end of July, early August. But it is something that I'm going to keep my eye on. And if it goes south, I think it's a very, very bad reflection on Adam Peters and Dan Quinn.
So I agree with you. The only thing that I would say is that is a position that isn't as noticeable as wide receiver. I think the significant majority of fans are not really capable of evaluating offensive line play. By the way, a lot of it's very difficult to evaluate because you don't know what the calls are. You don't know what the responsibilities are. We've had PFF guys tell us before, sometimes those are the hardest, along with DBs, to truly evaluate because you don't know what the call was. You don't know what the responsibilities were. Sometimes it looks like they gave up an easy sack, but they actually didn't have responsibility for the player that was rushing and sacked the quarterback. Center sometimes is just a physical noticing of if you get a nose tackle or if you get, a D tackle that just dominates physically your center, that is noticeable. Not as noticeable as the wide receiver position, though. But I agree with you that they better have gotten that right because they had a player who was solid, okay, not spectacular, but solid,
but
under contract.
League-wide, it was agreed that Tyler Biotic, like, pretty good, like, top 10, top half of the league center.
Yes. So they need at least that from Allegretti. All right, 301-230-0980. Let's start with Rob in D.C. What has the potential in the upcoming season to make the front office look bad?
Yeah, of course the receivers stand out, but for myself, I really look at this draft because last draft they didn't hit too good, and even in 24, you look at Jaden was a big hit. Sanders was pretty good, but everybody else is like big misses. So you look and you say, if Sonny Styles turns into Damon Davis 2.0, and God forbid Caleb Downs looks like an all-pro.
Did you say Jamin Davis because you broke up a little bit? I think you said Jamin Davis.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if Sonny Styles looks like Jamin Davis 2.0,
gotcha,
and Caleb Downs looks like an all-pro,
right.
Oh, you have issues then. And then you sit there and you look at our draft, and we have Williams over Zachariah Branch a whole round before him. You're like, okay, your talent evaluation and your front office is just missing the mark.
Well, I would also say, like, if the wide receiver from Arizona State, Jordan Tyson, looks great, you don't have to just pick a defensive player. To me, Reuben Bain Jr., I think he's going to be a monster in the NFL. I would have taken him at 7, short arms and all. But I hear what you're saying. I think a lot of people know where I stand on drafts. I just can't tell you for sure that the 2024 draft wasn't a good one after 2 seasons. And I definitely can't tell you much about the 2025 draft at this point. It's way too early. I understand there are concerns about Newton and Sandersville and Sinnott, but, you've had a quarterback play at an elite level. You've had a corner who played very well as a rookie. Defensively, they were a little bit disheveled last year because of injuries and maybe the coordinator. Coleman's started as a 3rd-round pick. And then last year, Connerly and Amos and Lane is the top 3 picks, and then Krosky Merritt in the 7th round. They all contributed in a major way as rookies. So I don't know how you would look at the 25 draft and say it's not good at this point. Yeah, they gave up some picks for Laramie Tunsil, and that turned out to be a great move based on how he played in year 1. But I hear you on the Sonny Styles at 7. Like if he ended up looking like Jamin Davis 2-3 years down the road and Caleb Downs turned into a superstar, sure. But I'm really looking for this year what would make him look bad. I don't think Sonny Styles can make him look bad after his rookie season. That's me personally. Kevin in Arlington, go ahead.
Yeah, Kev, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
If you look at the big picture with both Adam and Dan, they're defensive guys. 55% of the salaries being paid this year are going to D, whereas like 43 is going to O.
Mm-hmm. Is that what it is? Is that the actual breakdown?
Yeah. Go to Over the Cap. You'll see it.
Yeah.
You've got the big Lattimore trade was a total bust. That's a defensive guy. Your first defensive coordinator was a bust. You got a new D coordinator. You just put all your chips in free agency primarily on the defensive side of the ball, and you drafted Sonny. By the way, I like Jones. I like who we added in free agency, and I like Sonny. But, man, Kevin, if we don't have a dramatically improved defense, like if the reason we're not in the playoffs, let's say we're a losing team, is not because Jaden's hurt, but because the defense is awful again, I mean, can you say hot seat?
Yeah. No, I hear you. Like if we get to, we're in December and they've got, the 28th ranked DVOA defense in the league again, and the offense is lighting it up, but they're playing good teams and they're sitting there at, 8-7 or 7-8, and they're on the cusp of, but they don't make it. Yeah, it's going to be really, really, there are going to be some hard calls, hard days on what they did. for sure. But again, context will be everything because coaching is going to be a big part of it. But that's also a decision. And you can't go 0 for 2 on defensive coordinators and have the defense be the reason that you end up missing out in year 3. I agree.
Not after they've added so much, or they've tried. That's where they've been focused, and that is their orientation.
They should have been focused there. We both agree on that.
Yeah. So, but I am hopeful. I think this is a 9 or 10 win team with reasonable health. I'm excited about the season.
By the way, let's point out a couple of things, right? Kinlaw was an addition. He played pretty well. Looks like he will be a big part of what they're doing. Dorrance Armstrong in year 1.
Can I stop you right there, Kevin?
Yeah.
I don't think Steve Suter in his film reviews last season thought all that much of Kinlaw. I mean, you keep saying that. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm forgetting.
He liked Kinlaw much more.
Are you sure?
Often.
Okay.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Then I'm wrong.
100%. And he really liked Dorrance Armstrong. Let's not forget that. Dorrance Armstrong really was.
And Jacob Martin.
Yeah, and he was part of, year 1 when, I don't love, kind of looking back on that, those that look back on it and say it was just all in number 2 overall in the pick with Jaden Daniels. That was a big part of it, don't get me wrong, but Dorrance Armstrong and Fowler Jr. and, Chin and Noah I and Wagner and Luvu, these were all significant. Luvu and Wagner made NFL all AP NFL number 2 second team.
That question, the first year was pretty interesting.
So it's hard to go back and say that they haven't gotten it right at all. But I'm with you that defensively, everybody's going to look bad if that defense isn't improved. And it has to be more than just slightly improved. And by the way, Kev, it'd be hard for it to be as bad. It'd be really hard.
Oh my God. Yes.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
Yep. You too. Steve, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing? I am concerned about the center situation, but alarmed about the wide receiver position. And I'll tell you why I'm alarmed about the wide receiver situation. Noah Brown is a classic case of an individual who had a known injury history, but the team decided to wait it out, see how things are going to work out. I'm not saying that Burks is going to be healthy or not, but I'll say this: his history shows that he'll be injury prone. So you take him, and then God forbid if Terry got hurt, and then we're stuck like we are last year. Yeah. So that's how I look at it. I think it's a major. It's not
just Burks. It's the ability of everybody else too. I mean,
right.
If they go in with this group and they're not able to be what they were at least 2 years ago or something approximating that, they're not going to look good. They're not. But then I would ask you, and I'll ask everybody else when we get there, if we do get there, let's hope we don't. Okay, well, what was the solution? They tried to get the 2 best receivers in free agency. They may have drafted the best receiver had he fallen to them at number 7. They had a plan before the guy went, nuts with Ayuk on a 1-year prove-it deal. This is why I think, just from their standpoint, unless they know a lot more than we don't know, man, they could really do themselves a favor adding Diggs.
Right. That's my whole thing. Let's forget about with off the field crap. On the field, Diggs produces. Period.
No doubt.
I just don't get why you wouldn't bring him in unless it's a money thing.
I think more likely than not, it's a money thing right now. Let's see how it plays out here over the next week or so. You also said the center thing, which is what Max said, and understood. Yeah, I mean, they had a guy under contract, and a guy that was, more than serviceable at center. So it can't be a disastrous step back at that position because they'll look bad on that one. Now, I can tell you, Steve, they are confident they made the right decision. There is no doubt that they feel like they are in very good hands with Nick Allegretti at center. So we'll see. Thanks. Let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, go ahead.
I kind of agree with Mac. I think the center situation is bad, but we have to look at the wide receiver position because the wide receiver position has been bad for 3 years. You know what's sad, Kevin? We had a better wide receiving core before Adam Peters got here than we do now. That's the sad part. And since then, you know, you can sit up here and defend them. But I challenge you right now. You have a podcast. Get someone on your show that was on the Cliff Kingsbury crew last year that's not working, and just talk to them. Talk to them.
We've
do the same thing.
There's been some conversation there, but I want to just you statement, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but I want you to go back and tell me why the wide receiver group prior to Adam Peters being here was better.
We had Curtis Samuel, we had Jahan Dotson, we had Terry McLaurin, and then we had De'Ami Brown. We had guys that could get down the field, that could stretch the field, that could get open in space. We had guys that we didn't have the quarterback, but we had guys that could get open in space and could get down the field.
It wasn't a great wide receiver group.
It's better than we got now.
Okay.
And you know,
well, De'Ami's on the team now, but I know what you're saying.
We had to get De'Ami back. But
Curtis Samuel wasn't available enough, you know,
Kevin,
so you got that too.
Here's the thing. So, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you something. How much would you pay to go get Marvin Harrison Jr.? How much?
Ooh.
I think at this point, if you're the commander.
Have you been following his story at all?
Judging by the camp clips, not a dollar.
Talent. Have you been? What did you say? What did he say?
I didn't say anything. I'm sitting there.
What did you say, Max? That he
judging by the clips out of camp, I'm seeing a lot of drops. I don't know.
There's a lot going on with Marvin Harrison Jr. that's actually a little bit alarming because there seems to be a major case of the yips right now that he's going through. I mean, Markel Fultz-esque at the just different sport at the wide receiver position. Unbelievable talent at Ohio State, but they say that he just keeps talking. They say that he is so lacking in confidence right now. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. What would I give up to go get Marvin Harrison Jr.? I don't know, but you'd be asked for a lot. I mean, he was the what was he? The number 3 pick in the draft, number 2 pick in the draft.
Yeah, he was 3rd.
Yeah.
I don't mean to talk over you, but
what else you got?
I would take a chance on him. Yes, you can get him and still sign Stephon Diggs. I would get both of them.
You don't know that Marvin Harrison Jr. is available.
You get him on a rookie deal. You would get him.
Yeah, but you don't know that he's available.
And
would you give up? Would you give up a first rounder or a package of 2 2s and a 3 for a guy that's got the yips right now?
You know what's sad, Kevin? I'm gonna tell you what's sad. Josh Harris is not playing games. We see that how he's dealing with Daryl Morey in Philadelphia. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can sit up here and play jokes, and you can sit up here, and Adam Peters can sit up here and tell everybody and their mama all the excuses that he wants. I tried to get this, I tried to get that. Let me ask you something, Kevin, and Max, for that matter.
Sure.
If both y'all were married, well, Max, I don't know if you're married, and you kept coming to your wife, and you keep coming up short in a certain part of the bedroom, and you saying, I'm trying. How long do you think it's going to take for your wife? It's going to get to, you know what, I'm not listening to that.
God, you're just so good. Oh, my God. We're gonna do a day before the season starts. One of those dog days in August where we're gonna give Mark a whole half hour. All right, thank you. Yes, I get your point. Look, I said, there's only so much you can say about there weren't any other solutions. We tried. Trying sometimes doesn't have anything to do with it. It's results, and you don't have to worry about those results that you just presented. Let's go to Paulie. Paulie, go ahead. What's the thing that'll make the front office look the worst?
Hey, guy, how you doing? L to the W, man.
What's up? Yeah.
Mark Largo sound like he's talking from experience. But
yeah, sounds like he's been there. He understands. True.
Yeah, I know. But anyways, man, look, I've been saying this all off season, man. It's the center position, man. Like, you got the offensive line basically locked up, man, from tackle to guard. And now you're throwing in this question mark in the center. And the 2 teams that we chasing in our division is stacked up front at defensive tackle. And I don't buy this this love fest they had about Allegretti the other day. Listen, man, Allegretti has struggled as a guard. That's why he got benched, number one. Number two, I heard the same love fest about Quan Martin last year when they switched up Quan Martin position in safety, where they, instead of him covering half the field, they had him try to be a center field safety, and he struggled with it. So to me, it was the same lip service that they're doing with Allegretti because they're moving him to center. And now, like you said, he got a calf strain. So it's a setback. Automatically is a setback at that position. So to me, that's a problem, man. Number two problem has to be the D-backs. Like, we got the Smurfs out there on the island. You know what I mean? And what's the depth behind it? I know you got Rasul Douglas and
Trey Amos is not a Smurf. Trey Amos is 6'1", 6'1 and a half, 6'2".
He's on the pump list also.
Well, I understand that, but we're expecting him to be a starter.
Okay, expecting and where he at right now.
Okay, but right now, the starting corners aren't Smurfs. Trey Amos isn't a short corner. By the way, nor is Rasul Douglas if he ends up being the replacement.
How can you say he's a starter when he's not even on the field yet, man?
Okay, so if he's not a starter, Rasul Douglas is 6'2". I'm just saying our corners, you said we got Smurfs on the outside at corner.
Hey, listen, man. All I know is you can bring all the pass rushers in that you want. If you ain't got nobody on the back end to cover anybody, then it's a problem. That's all I'm saying. And third, which really shouldn't really be third, but it is third, it's this kicking situation. That's the one position they ain't got right since they've been here.
They have not gotten that right. That is true.
Outside of the consistency of Austin Seibert, but he didn't have a strong weight.
Seibert.
I
want to go back to your first offensive line center point when you just said, we're covered. We got a good O-line except for this center thing. You wanted to trade Laramie Tunsil.
No.
I just want to remind you of that.
Let's go. The concept of trading Larry Tunsil wasn't because I didn't like Larry Tunsil. It's because in my opinion, we was developing a good young line. Brandon Coleman did a solid job as a left tackle as a rookie. Then you drafted Connerly on the right side, and I thought we needed more assets in the draft, and Larry Tunsil would have brought that for us. It wasn't that I didn't like Tunsil.
But let me just tell you, if they had listened to you and traded Laramie Tunsil, obviously that would be number one on the list right now in terms of the front office better have gotten that right, or they're going to look really bad.
I don't think it would, because like I said, I thought Brandon Coleman did a good job. Brandon Coleman did a good job as rookie.
Trading one of the two best players on your team would have put them at risk of it not working out.
In the year that we went to the playoffs, we wasn't complaining about Brandon Coleman.
You're right.
Like that about
you're right.
And I feel,
but he's not Laramie Tunsil.
We don't know. He could develop into Larry Tunsil. Larry Tunsil wasn't Larry.
If they thought he was going to develop into Laramie Tunsil, they wouldn't have traded for Laramie Tunsil.
No, they traded for Larry Tunsil because in their mind, it was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer. They knew what they were going to get, and they got what they thought they was going to get. But like I was saying, it reminds me of the wide receiver position. I'm not worried about the wide receiver position because I like what they're doing. They're invested in that position. They made draft picks every year at that position. They're getting Terry back. So the only confusion in my mind was I didn't understand why they didn't want to bring Debo back. I think Debo was a good number two. He was just thrusted into the number one position because of the system.
I would have considered that too. And it's not exactly what they've been looking for. They've been looking for vertical speed, threat. But I still think Debo would have been a really good football player with everything healthy around him. I thought he played well last year for this team. And look the 49ers got him on the absolute cheap. What?
And you got to look. That got to be a market. So that got to be the market for Diggs around that $7 to $10 million area. And also, man, what's going on with his brother? Is this
Trayvon?
a package deal that's holding it up? Trayvon and
I don't know. I don't think so.
It got to be a package deal, man.
What you think from both of them that Stefan's not going anywhere that doesn't take his brother? No, I don't think that's the case. I mean, his brother's still out there, but he's not in position to dictate that kind of thing at this point in his career. No way.
I'm not saying I'm not saying they're dictating it. I'm just saying maybe that's what the both of them are thinking. They want to go there. Come on. Both of them.
All right, I got to run. I got to go. I'm up against it. Thanks, Paulie. Everybody else on hold, stay there. Question is, what has the biggest potential to kind of blow up in the front office's face? What could make them look really bad later in the year or at the end of the year about the way they've handled the roster or even the coaching staff? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. What could make the front office look bad this year? 301-230-0980. We still have a bunch of callers on hold. Let's rip through them. Ben's going to join us at 12. TC, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Taking my call. I believe it is the wide receiver room, no doubt about it, because it's the third year of trying to upgrade that room, and we've been failing in that department forever for 3 seasons right now. Now, the center position, I will say, is the second, but the only reason why I say that is because they feel like Biash wasn't strong enough, wasn't physically strong enough. That's why they really got rid of him. So they're going to Allegretti to think that Allegretti is strong enough to hold up.
I think they think Allegretti is a just much better communicator at the position and was easier for the rest of the O-line to work with. That's actually, I think, the number one reason that they are super confident in him and weren't as thrilled with Biadasz. But I still
getting punished as a center. He was getting punished physically up there. They was dominating him.
No, they weren't dominating him necessarily.
Okay.
That's not true. There were a couple of games where he may have struggled, but he wasn't dominated through the first 2 years.
Well, okay. Well, it was more than a couple of games. I give you that. Maybe not dominate, but more than a couple of games. But getting back to the wide receiver, Mark was right about that. We have been lacking in the wide. Here's a good point that I'm going to get off. So Jaden came in with his class, the 4 top quarterbacks that he got drafted with. All 4 of those guys, receiver room is tremendously better, way better than what we had for the 3 years that they've been in versus the 3 years Daniel's been in. That's the problem. And that's the way fans going to look at Peters and company and Quinn and all them and saying they never upgraded that room at all. I mean, trying is different. I don't hear about trying. You have to do it. Forget all that. If you wanted to get those guys, you could have paid like the Raiders overpaid somebody or something. The Nats overpaid for a player one time, and basically overpay if you wanted somebody. Try ain't gonna do it. You have to do it.
Okay, a couple things. I mean, DJ Moore was there. They had a really good pass catching tight end when Caleb got to Chicago. They drafted Odunze, who, by the way, has been unavailable for a lot of the. I actually loved the selection of Luther Burden and wanted our team to pick him. They took another tight end. They had some backs. You know, they had some of that stuff there. Denver obviously had some stuff there. Drake May, they gave him Stephon Diggs last year, you know, and they had a terrific OC when it comes to pass design and getting people open. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. Those situations have been better, you know, and it would have been nice had they, you know, been able to add something and they've tried, but trying doesn't have anything to do with it. Let's get to Aveen. Aveen, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, I'm going to go along with what a lot of the callers have been saying. You know, to me, it's just the lack of investment in the skill position groups. You know, we have a superstar quarterback. We have him on a rookie contract. We've had all this draft capital, all this money to spend. And to me, that means there's no reason why this offense shouldn't be a top 10 offense next season. That should be the standard. That should be what they're aiming for. I mean, that's the reason why a star quarterback on a rookie contract is viewed as the holy grail, so you can have offenses like that. So to me, you know, Warren Sharp had a tweet yesterday just detailing what the Patriots did and how much they've invested around Drake May at the skill position group. And then he ended the tweet saying, compare that to what Washington has done with Jaden Daniels. Yeah. And that's kind of what the national narrative has been about us and why people are like, They also
traded for one of the best pass blocking left tackles in the game and drafted a starting right tackle in the first round too. Those are investments in their quarterback and in their offense. They're not skill position investments. I understand that, but they're still investments in their starting quarterback on a rookie deal. Taking on the Laramie Tunsil contract, then extending him, drafting a tackle in the first round. They could have selected Luther Burden. I actually wanted Luther Burden in that spot, one of the players that I would have considered for sure. And Luther Burden looks like after his rookie year, he's got a chance to be, you know, a special receiver in this league. But it's not like they haven't invested in him. It's just the skill position spots haven't worked out. The offensive line has.
Right. But you would think by year 3 of having Jaden Daniels, like we wouldn't be considered as having one of the worst skill position groups in the league.
You're right.
What we're considered as. And, I agree with you on Luther Burden and just the investment in resources. Like how much, I agree, offensive line is super important, but we spent like a first, second, and third round pick essentially last season for 2 offensive tackles. We've signed a bunch of offensive linemen. We had Wiley playing right tackle in 24. We had Coleman playing left tackle in 24. And it's like, did we have to invest that much in the offensive line? How different would it feel if we had Luther Burden right now with Terry McLaurin?
I don't know.
Just dabbled a little bit.
Last year isn't necessarily the year to evaluate Connerly and Tunsil and their contribution to winning because their starting quarterback wasn't there and the receiver position fell apart too. Look, you can't do everything. It's not all in your control. That's not an excuse for them. I'm not giving them an easy way to get off of here in year 3, not having a good enough skill position group. But the cupboard was bare, and they have built up other areas of the team offensively to help them. But I'm not. You're right. Like it should be better. They could have, done a couple of things. They could have overpaid for Dobbs. I don't think Pierce was ever leaving personally. They could have brought back Debo. They could have signed Diggs already. Let's see what they do with Diggs. Diggs is the possibility.
Yeah,
By the way, last year they signed Debo. Let's not forget that. They did add a playmaker to the mix. It didn't matter last year because none of it was able to sort of, it was impossible to evaluate what it would have meant to winning without their starting quarterback out there.
Kevin, I've been meaning to ask you this, and I get you said they tried with Dobbs. That felt like the big move to make with me. And it feels like they just wanted Dobbs at a certain price because Dobbs actually wasn't that expensive. Like we could have overpaid a little bit.
But let me ask you: were you a big fan of Dobbs? Do you think he's a massive difference maker? I do think he's the speed that they want on the outside. So there is that. I mean, I'm not even the big. I don't think Alec Pierce is worth the money. By the way, he'd be on the PUP list right now because that's what he is. That's where he is right now in Indy. They expect him to be ready for the regular season, but are you blown away with Dobbs?
I thought he would be a perfect fit because he's somebody who could have filled in for the loss of Ertz, just somebody who can get open, move the chains, get open in the red zone. And I was saying I thought Jaden Daniels could elevate him into being like 1,000 type of receiver.
I liked him.
But,
I mean, and you're right, the money wasn't crazy, but he's got a choice in the matter too. Right. He decided the reigning AFC champions were a better spot for him. I got to go. I'm up against it. Sorry for the people that I didn't get to. We're going to be doing probably this again, I'm sure, at some point before the season begins, or maybe not. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Ben Standig's next. All right, the team not practicing today, but they did open up camp with all veterans in on Wednesday. We talked to Ben on Wednesday. He's back with us today as he usually is in his normal spot. Ben Standig covers the team about as well as anybody else does. Read him on his Substack, Last Man Standig. You can follow him on X at Ben Standig. So I'll ask you the question that I just asked callers for the last hour, and that is, let me just preface it by saying last year you were, very spot on, clairvoyant with your, they don't have any depth. God forbid their receivers get hurt because they don't have anything behind Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, etc. What's the area of the team where the powers that be, front office, I'll throw the coach in there as well, could look the worst if something transpires in a certain way?
Good question. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, if Terry McLaurin were to miss games again because of an injury, there is no obvious person who's okay, well, now this can be the, fill-in main person. As it stands right now, it doesn't look that way. The difference, though, between this group to me and last year's group is that I just didn't feel like last year's group was really there was nobody proven it at all. McCaffrey hadn't, done much yet. Lane was a rookie. Chris Moore was old. Just hadn't really done anything. Right. At least with this group, again, there's a lot to do. But Traylon Burks, a former first-round pick who's got all the tools. Unfortunately, he gets hurt, but he could, be a thing. De'Ami Brown can do the one thing specifically: get down the field. McCaffrey, Lane, Antonio Williams. I think they at least have other options. Plus, Chig Okonkwo is kind of de facto, a wide receiver by default almost. So I don't feel as bad about that, even though they would have a hard time replacing Terry. I actually do wonder if Chig Okonkwo were to get hurt, then what? Because I don't know that they have a guy who can do what he does. It's like how last year when they brought in, they said their plan was to get bigger on the edges defensively to stop the run. They bring in Dietrich Wise. He gets hurt in week 2, and that plan went out the window.
Right.
So I kind of wonder if that would happen with Okonkwo. The other one that just comes to mind is, cornerback right now, right? Trey Amos is out. So watching that group, I did think Rasul Douglas, I think it's going to work out, I would guess. You guys been around, but, we're not talking about a Pro Bowl level there, and we'll see where Sanders still develops. But that's a spot where I think it's not even so much an injury, but just in general, what are they doing there? But I guess actually there is one more, center, right? I mean,
you've hit on all the answers. I think the one that would be highest profile though is wide receiver, and they could add Diggs, and our perspective would change about that. But that's the area where there's just this feeling, and it's not wrong, even though at least I'll acknowledge they've tried, but trying may not have anything to do with it. But there just doesn't seem to be enough weaponry around Jaden Daniels. They've invested in the offensive line over these last couple of years, trading for Laramie Tunsil, drafting a tackle in the first round last year. That's an investment in the quarterback, but wide receiver specifically, the other quarterbacks that were taken in the 2024 draft have had better situations, and there's been more focus by those front offices on those situations.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. What Drake May and Caleb Williams have received. Bo Nix gets Jalen Waddle this year. Michael Penix already had Drake London and Bijan Robinson. And I mean, that other than Terry McLaurin,
Stephon Diggs last year, AJ Brown this year in New England.
Right. But yeah, other than Terry McLaurin,
they did trade DJ Moore in Chicago, but they've got Burden and they've got Odunze and they've got they got backs, they've got tight ends. Yeah,
no, I think that's the if you just looked at Washington in a vacuum and said, okay, they invested a ton of money to get one of the best left tackles, and they traded picks. They spent the first round pick on a right tackle. They gave the right guard a big fat extension. Okay, this is what you want. Invest in the line. That's great. It's just that the offensive line doesn't create fantasy football stats.
No.
And it does, and that's not, and there, so it doesn't feel as good. Even though, I mean, the funny part is we just went through this in 2024. Terry McLaurin and a bunch of random receivers, and they had one of the best offenses in the league, and Jaden had arguably the best rookie season for a quarterback ever. And here we are 2 years later, kind of the same setup, and where everybody's like, oh, no, God, what? This isn't enough. They just lost Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler, and, like, they don't have anybody, and what are they going to do? And, I think because nobody wants to admit it, even if you're incredibly high on Jaden Daniels still, like last year was not good for anybody, right? And, the injuries and everything else, like, hey, we need to, like, help him a little bit more. And, it's they just haven't done that. I mean, again, they tried, and I respect the fact that they didn't just take the Alec Pierce allocated money and then give it to somebody else just to do it. But, yeah, I mean, look, here, the reality is this. Whether it's McCaffrey, whether it's Jalen Lane, whether it's Antonio Williams, one of those guys steps up, we'll have this conversation can probably end to a degree. If one of those guys looks like a legit starter, Williams would obviously be the best bet. But if that doesn't happen, then it's like, hey, Adam Peters, you drafted 3 receivers in 3 years, none of them are panning out, and you didn't get some type of veteran presence to help Terry. I mean, they did get Debo last year, but Debo's not a true wide receiver, which is why I didn't have any issue with them kind of moving on from him. So, yeah, it's definitely a concern. Like I said, I do think that Chigakonkwo probably should be factored into the receiver room, even if he's technically a tight end. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely questions until they're not, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, you also bring up the flip side to this conversation, which is it's not over for them because Burks could end up looking good. McCaffrey could. Jalen Lane could. Antonio Williams could develop into something that, they didn't get with McCaffrey. There's still a chance here. And part of it will be about what they do offensively, schematically, and how good Blau is in getting people open. And we feel pretty confident in the quarterback's ability to deliver. I also think, and I've said this a lot, and I actually believe the opposite of this will happen, but there is a chance that Terry at 31 years old isn't what he was 2 years ago. Coming off an injury, riddled season and not his fault that he didn't have the numbers. He didn't play enough and the quarterback wasn't there. But I actually think he'll be ready. I think he's a pro. I think this is a different, beginning to a season than he had last year, obviously. But there is that possibility that in addition to not having a true number 2 or even beyond that their true number 1 isn't what he used to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously we went through this whole thing last year about do they want to pay a receiver who's hitting the wrong side of 30? And obviously they were only willing to do it to a certain degree. But you're right. I mean, at no fault of his own other than just, father time, yeah, it's reasonable to think that McLaurin at some point will start to lose. I mean, Stephon Diggs is what, 32?
Yeah, he's
right? And he's
32. Yes.
Yeah, and he's still productive, but he's not as productive as he was 3 years ago, or
right.
I mean,
he's not the deep threat that he was. He's
right.
He's not unable to run, but he's not what he was in Minnesota or Buffalo.
Right, and obviously he did have a significant injury in between. But but that's the point. It's not that he can't. It's not that he can't be productive. It's just a matter of what level are you counting him on. They've been counting on Terry to be, a wide receiver 1, and that's fine. The other component is we're obviously focused on this year because this next year is too far away. But there is the possibility that Terry McLaurin, that the contract situation, rears its head again next off season, and then they don't even have, like, as it stands right now, they don't have a number 2. I'm sorry, they don't have somebody to replace him, let alone a number 2. So, like, it isn't just this year; it's the ongoing process of building, and that's why it is, paramount that Antonio Williams or Lane or McCaffrey or somebody, or maybe it's Traylon Burks, but the injuries with him, obviously he already missed practice yesterday with foot soreness. That's been his bugaboo over his career. So yeah, it's definitely a question. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, I mean, Terry is
and by the way,
valuable.
next year, free agency wise, it's Pickens. That's basically the class. I mean, there are other names in the class, but nobody of note at this point. I mean, Devontae Adams is going to be 35 years old. He could be available potentially, but it'll be Pickens after he's played on the franchise tag. That'll be the only one in free agency. That is, I know you've made that point before, and we don't want to get ahead of ourselves because maybe some of their younger players will develop, and maybe Terry will have such a big year, they'll be forced to rework whatever it is and keep him. But if they do struggle at that position, and he is now entering that age in which their analytics and research people were concerned about in the first place, man, they are in a bind going into 27 at that position. Real bind.
And the other, we sort of alluded to this, but when you go back to draft Jaden Daniels #2, and what is this thing that we all think about? Okay, here you go, QB rookie contract.
Right.
Oh, wait, he's actually really, really good? Oh, my God, this is incredible. Now you can spend all this money because you don't have to pay him yet. Sooner than later, that's no longer going to be an option because he's going to get paid, and then that whole thing goes out the window, and then you start seeing, where teams have to start, releasing players, salary cap cuts because they got to make it work largely because of the quarterback contract. So, yeah, it is odd that they haven't done a bit more. By the way, like speaking of Diggs, we spent this whole off season talking about they got to get younger faster, primarily on defense, but just in general. And now it's all about, can you bring in the 32-year-old wide receiver? I know it's not apples to oranges. It's it's an individual thing we're discussing, but at the same point, the idea that the saving grace is the exact type of player everybody didn't want 4 months ago when it came to free agency and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that, it's not like there have been, it's not like there's been an abundance of great receivers available to them. Free agency last year was basically Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp. This year it was Alec Pierce and Romeo Doubs. And who knows, they may have drafted Carnell Tate had he fallen to 7, but there wasn't obvious stuff. They could have taken Luther Burden, instead of Josh Connerly. It's not like they're just, ignoring it and swinging and missing all over the place on great players. That's not really what's happened. It doesn't make it any better that there haven't been, obvious options, but an obvious option right now exists, even though he is older, and that's Stephon Diggs. So here's where we are. He's the only one left. Keenan Allen wouldn't be the play here. Tyreek Hill's not the play because he's not even going to play this year, more likely than not. Everybody understands the Brandon Ayuk situation now. So it's down to Diggs, basically, unless somebody like, Demario Douglas or Cedric Tillman or somebody like that becomes available late. But that's not going to be, a wow move. So where are you on Diggs right now? A, do you want it? B, do you think it'll happen?
I was just talking on my podcast with Jay Gruden earlier this morning, and I was kind of saying to him, how do you, if you're looking at their receiver room, at what point do you think, okay, we have to go get somebody else or not? And he's like, well, you probably should have figured that out before, by the time you left minicamp. Like, okay, this is the team we have. And he's like, the fact that they haven't gone out and made a move for Diggs probably suggests they're good with what they have, or at least they think so. Now, that said, when Noah Brown came available a couple of years ago, we were all like, oh, clearly they got to go get that guy who's a guy. I mean, no disrespect to Noah Brown, but he's not a Pro Bowler. And it was like, what a big upgrade. And of course they did go to get that. So, I next week they're off today, they're back tomorrow, and then they practice like 5 out of 6 days in a row or something like that. I get through that and then maybe see where they're at. I just think that, look, Adam Peters, again, he's drafted 3 receivers in 3 consecutive years, including the one this year. I just imagine he wants to see this out. If they're going to play 12 and 13 personnel, that already means you're going to have fewer receivers on the field, and they're going to want to see these guys play. I mean, Peters didn't – we can all sit here and say Luke McCaffrey this or Jalen Lane or whatever, but, Williams just got here. You want to see them work it out. So I'm kind of leaning towards no on Diggs, but give me a week and see where they're at. if you ask me, at the end of next week, hey, how the receivers look, and I say, well, Jaden's looking and there's nobody open, or then maybe we have the conversation. The other thing is, of course, I don't know where Diggs' head's at. He's got still some off the field stuff going on. I'm sure that's got to be a factor for some teams. Maybe this one, I don't know. And for some of these vets, like, they just want to skip as much of training camp as possible, no matter what. So he may be holding up anybody from signing him. But at the moment, I would say no, they won't, and no, I don't think they should. But I have the right to change my mind if in a week or so I'm like, yeah, this is not working out.
Do you have any knowledge about any sort of interest level? Like, for all we know, there are reasons that only they know that make them not interested. And the number one reason typically in a case like this is money. Player thinks he's worth something much greater than what the team's willing to offer.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Adam Peters said the other day in the press conference that, they like the room, but he's not afraid to make a move. My sense is that they are still open to the receiver market. Like, it's not, they're going, oh, we're definitely out now. So, you're always open to everything, as they will all say, but I do think there's like something there to it. I don't think they have blinders on. I really think that they're completely set, that if something shakes free, that they would consider making that move. But is that Diggs specifically? I mean, like I said, there's a lot of sort of, there's some point to go against him too, whether that's, the age to a degree, even though we had another 1,000-yard season, the off the field stuff, if that's a factor, all those things, or just even just the fit, right? I mean, do they think he's the guy, if they're going to do this, that makes the most sense for them? So I think they're still open to a receiver. How much they're open to him, that I can't say for sure. But like you pointed out, if we're just looking at the bigger names, it's hard to figure out who would it be besides him at this point.
Yeah. Ben Standig, of course, joining us, our team insider. You were there for the first 2 days of training camp with veterans in. Did anything just stand out, like as, wow, that actually was notable?
Well, I think broadly on defense, again, no pads yet, and defense typically starts out faster than the offense, all that. But the speed aspect is definitely noticeable. The activity going on at the line of scrimmage, whether both in terms of guys like Owe, getting after the quarterback, or the constant moving of players around, faking blitz, dropping into coverage, or being on the line and dropping back, or guys coming from different angles. I think all those things are pretty interesting. We've talked about it, and this is what we think would happen, the Brian Flores type of defense, and it's looking more and more like that as time goes on. Frankie Louvu said yesterday that we can't even go full bore yet because obviously no pads and things like that. So I'm curious next week to see when they do start that, how it looks. But I think the defense to me has really just stood out in that regard. And they have one, quote unquote, one practice the last 2 days when they're doing pretty much just red zone work, which is obviously a hard space for the offense to produce in general, let alone first 2 days of camp and you're working guys around. So yeah, I just think the defense in general is what has just stood out. Within that, Owe has been noticeable. And Deron Payne has stood out to me a couple of times. Seeing Louvu, Chenal, Styles, all that has looked pretty good to me. So that, I think that's probably the biggest thing that stood out to me.
You wrote in your write-up after the first 2 days that you see Rasul Douglas challenging for regular season snaps, possibly as a starter. Do you think that's because of Trey Amos's current health, or do you think it's just because Douglas is as good as anybody they have?
Yeah, I mean, the Mikey Sandersville thing is just, it's an interesting situation. There's been a lot of reason to be optimistic about him. Super smart kid, very good athlete. Competitive, plays bigger than his size. He had half of their interceptions. Not that it was a huge total, but he was the one guy able to make plays. But as we've discussed, the reason why I think everybody wanted to see him in the slot was because he just gives up a lot of size on the outside. Douglas is over 6 feet tall. He's been in the league for, this is his 10th year, been there, done that, which goes both ways. It's to say, well, he's bouncing around a lot. He's not like a guy teams have to keep, but, he may very well be just in terms of, say, pure cornerback on week one, he may very well be a better option than Sanders Hill, unless you're just playing the long game. You're like, hey, we believe in Sanders Hill. He'll get there, but he's not there yet. So, yeah, as far as the Trey Amos part goes, I mean, I'll just have to take, Dan Quinn at their word that it's not a big deal. The broken leg is healed, but hopefully the soreness goes away in a little bit, but they don't see it as an issue. But yeah, I think Douglas has a shot to play again. He's only been practiced 2 days with the team. But yeah, I think he has a real shot there.
Right now, Chris Paul or Brandon Coleman at left guard?
I mean, I'll default to the last year's starter because I want to see with the pads and see Coleman get out in space a bit more. Yesterday, as they've been doing, they alternate who's working with the ones. I think Coleman had the first reps yesterday, but I want to say Chris Paul had the first reps the day before that. So I'll stay with Paul just because he's the guy that had the job last year after Coleman faltered at the beginning. But as we've mentioned, it just feels like all things being equal, Coleman's athleticism, his ability to get down the field a bit more works better with what they're trying to do in the zone blocking. But, ultimately you got to make the plays, and Chris Paul is the one that did that last year.
Of the two kickers, has anybody stood out, Moody or Stevens?
So yesterday, the way some of us were situated at practice was we were behind one of the end zones where they were kicking. So like a little just to the side of the goalpost. So you're watching to see if the ball goes in, right? And they both made the same thing they did in OTAs and minicamp. Started at 28, kick that, go back 5 yards, each subsequent kick till you get to the 53. So they both made every kick 6 for 6. But when you watch the ball go through the goalpost, Moody's is coming through, looks fine. But it's like the difference between somebody who runs like a 4.6 40 and somebody that runs a 4.3 40.
Just because of the leg strength from Stevens.
Yeah, when he's kicking it, the ball is like still like accelerating and rising as it's going through, and that's why he's got a shot to make deeper kicks, 55 and beyond, and that part stands out. So if they're both accurate, all things being equal, I kind of would lean towards the rookie. But of course, in that position, it's all about trust. And, Moody came in, did a good job last year. So Stevens, if he continues to prove this, then, I think he's got a real shot. But it's not like Moody's faltering. I just think the kid has a big leg. And if they value that, then, I think he would get it.
All right. Thanks. Have a good weekend. I'll talk to you on Monday.
Of course, man. See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. Major League Baseball trade deadline Monday. We'll talk with Andrew Golden about what he thinks the Nats will do. Up next, maybe a big change in CBS's #1 NFL booth upon us. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. CBS Sports has placed Tony Romo on leave after he was arrested in Wisconsin for driving under the influence. I'm sure you guys have seen all of the video from the sobriety tests, the field tests, the taken into custody, the whole thing. He's clearly impacted, and apparently there was an open bottle in his car of alcohol. The interesting thing is CBS has already announced, and Rappaport put this out, others have put it out, that J.J. Watt will join Jim Nantz and Tracy Wolfson as CBS Sports' lead NFL team during Tony Romo's absence. And then CBS said that they'll release the remainder of their NFL and CBS roster at a later date. First of all, J.J. Watt, he was working with Iron Eagle last year, right?
Yes.
He was good. I thought J.J. Watt was excellent. Well, was that his second year doing it?
I think it was his first.
What? It was his first?
I think it was his first year doing it.
Yeah, he was good. He was good. I wonder whether this is the first step towards firing Tony Romo. Because getting out of the contract, 10 years, $180 million for Tony Romo. That's what he signed a few years ago. And, there's been some reporting in recent years that CBS hasn't been thrilled with Tony Romo. They felt like preparation wasn't necessarily his thing. And the, predicting the play before it happened just kind of got a little bit old. And by the way, wasn't as accurate as it was the first year. Romo, look, he's okay. I think the first couple of years, I, like everybody else, was sort of enamored with how much he still knew the league and how he was calling plays before they happened. And obviously he's a bit goofy with the, here we go, Jim. I mean, all of that. But because they paid him so much, because I'm sure there is a personal conduct policy for termination with cause in his contract somewhere, not always the easiest thing to get done. Termination with cause, ask any employment, attorney, not the easiest thing to actually get done for the employer. Would this get it done? Is this what they're doing? Putting him on leave? We'll see. Be interesting, man. If they were able to get out of the Romo deal because of this incident. Yeah, a lot of the AI videos going around with him, they are hysterical. Him and Tiger in the car together with about 300 empty beer cans. Yeah, it's funny and it's not funny, but he was obviously under the influence. There was no doubt about that, coming from the golf course apparently headed towards Grandma and Grandpa's house in Wisconsin. So CBS has put Tony Romo on notice. Real quickly before we get to some Nats talk, do you have that Curt Cignetti soundbite that I told you to get?
I do. Give me just a moment. Firing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Curt Cignetti, the Indiana now national championship coach, during the Big Ten Media Day, actually it's Media Days, plural, they've been in the midst of it, he took a shot at the SEC. There is a big rivalry, as I'm sure you know right now, between the two heavyweight leagues, the Big Ten and the SEC. This was Curt Cignetti talking about his Big Ten versus some of the other leagues. Specifically, he's referring, even though he doesn't say it by name, to the SEC.
The Big Ten is the best league in football, and a lot of really good football teams. It's hard to win on the road. Very physical football teams, very well coached. It definitely prepares you for the playoffs. There's no doubt about it. The numbers speak for themselves. I mean, we don't run a hype machine up here in the Midwest. We believe everything's earned, not given. And when we fall short, we say we fell short. We don't cry a river, whine, and complain. All right? And that's why we're the best.
Curt Cignetti has earned the right to do this and to speak this way. I mean, first of all, the conference has won the last 3 national championships. Michigan in 23, Ohio State in 24, and Indiana last year. It's been since 2022 that the SEC won. And remember, there was a stretch of LSU, Bama, Georgia 4 years in a row. It's been since Clemson in 2018 that any conference other than the Big Ten or SEC has won the college football championship. But man, this Curt Cignetti dude, he's great, obviously. He took one of the worst programs in the history of college football and turned it around into a playoff team year 1 and a national championship team in year 2. And he is actually an entertaining interview. But man, he is confident in himself, and he's backed it up at every turn. And he's not wrong about the Big Ten, and the SEC does tend to whine more at playoff selection time than any other league. It'll be interesting this year, man. Ohio State's loaded, Texas is loaded, and the SEC's loaded as well. And we'll see what year 1 of Lane Kiffin at LSU, what that looks like. Ole Miss coming back with talent. College football season is going to be fun this year. It is top heavy per usual, but there's some coaching changes that are going to be interesting. Certainly Matt Campbell at Penn State, as much as any other, is the one I am looking forward to seeing. And then you've got, Kyle Whittingham, obviously at Michigan, taking over there after it looked like he was going to retire after being one of the best coaches in college football at Utah for a long period of time. Should be a hell of a season. By the way, we are only 4 weeks away from week 0 come tomorrow. 1 month exactly away from the first college football game of the year, which will be TCU and North Carolina in Dublin. What are the Nats going to do between now and Monday's trade deadline? We'll ask Andrew Golden that question next. Trade deadline's Monday. The Nats have lost 2 in a row, 2 tough losses. They had opportunities in the bottom of the 8th against Toronto with the bases loaded and 2 swings at it. Couldn't get it done. Last night, the tying run in the 7th was on third after Garcia was hitting for the cycle. 2 tough losses in a row. They're back to 500. They're 2.5 out on the wild card race. By the way, of both the second and the third spot, there are 3 wild card spots in both the American League and the National League. And right now, the number 2 wild card spot and the number 3 wild card spot are both wide open with about 6 teams in the mix for those 2 spots. The Nats are still one of them. But what will they do between now and Monday night? Joining us right now is Andrew Golden. Andrew has covered the team for the Post. He now covers the team for the Baltimore Banner at Andrew C. Golden on X. Love having Andrew on the show. So let me start before we get to Foster Griffin, Luis Garcia, and other possibilities. Not a great time, right, to lose 2 in a row. I know it's Atlanta, had a chance last night with a 3-0 lead. And then the day before losing to a team that had lost 8 of 11 coming in. This isn't the best timing for even a mini losing streak, is it?
No, for sure. I mean, everything's magnified at this time. I mean, obviously, when you think about the Nationals sell-off in 2021, is because it was based off how they performed in those final games, and they blew those games, and they kind of sold everybody off in 21, right? And so, like, you could say that all 162 games matter about the same, but around this time, I think the games are maybe magnified a little bit more than an average game, and everything kind of means more. And so I think, obviously, they're 1-3 in their last 4 games. And so when you're thinking about the trade deadline, if they continue to trend in the wrong direction, and they fall back in the wild card race, you give more of an incentive to sell. But if they keep winning, they'll find themselves in a position where they might do a mix of both. And so I think these games are crucial, and obviously Foster Griffin tonight will play a big role in that.
If you're right, and these games are crucial, what's the breaking point here between being more aggressive as a seller and not being aggressive as a seller? Where do you think they need to be after these next 3 against Atlanta?
I think you have to be about 2 or 3 games out of the wild card still, I think, to still be in a place where you're going to do a mix of buying and selling. Say they were to get, swept by Atlanta and they're 5 games back of the wild card, I think there's probably more of an incentive to want to sell, right? Because it's like that's what in theory a rebuilding team should do. If you're 5 games out and there's a lot of ground to make up, right? Then I think it makes it a little bit more difficult. Or like the Marlins, they lost 11 straight games. And it was like, oh, they're definitely going to sell, and they won 3 straight. And now it's like, okay, what do you do now, right? And so I think that it's a lot about where are you at on Saturday or Sunday. But I think if they keep trending in the wrong direction, I think you have to consider selling, but again, they've been the best offense in baseball for a reason, and so I wouldn't be surprised they're able to turn it around.
I just think that, and I've had this conversation, Andrew, with multiple people over the last week who have come on the show. This is an unexpected position that they are in, obviously. I mean, they had the second lowest win total heading into this season in the major leagues. This has to be a surprise to everybody in their building. With that said, they're not, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, where these opportunities exist every year. I don't think they can pass, especially considering the business, which is not super healthy. Their attendance isn't great. We also know that ownerships, continues to think about selling the team, and that's not going to happen without an increase in valuation, which winning would help. I just think you don't pass up on this unexpected opportunity, especially when it's legitimate, meaning their offense at this point, 110 games, isn't going to change. It's legitimate. No. Their starting pitching with Cavalli and Griffin for sure is pretty solid. I think they'd be a dangerous team if they got a third or a second wild card spot in a short series. So how do you think they should approach it?
Yeah, well, I wrote this in a column yesterday about trading Foster Griffin, right? When you look at Foster, right, it makes a ton of sense to trade him, right? Because it's a rebuilding team. There's value. He's on an expiring contract. So I get that side of it, right? But at the same time, it's you play the games to win, right? And so it's if you're 2 games out of a wild card, right? Then why shouldn't you make an effort to go for it? Now I'm not saying they should go all in with this roster, right? Their bullpen is really in a spot where I don't think that I mean, you had to make like 6 trades for relievers to bring their bullpen to a much better spot, right? Like, I'm not saying to mortgage your future for this season, but like, I think there's a credible argument to try, right? Like, you don't know how many chances you're going to get to win, right? Where it's like, you can hope that by compiling prospects that some of those guys pan out, right? But you just never know how it's going to go. Like, I think a lot about the Orioles, the Orioles in 2022, right? Like, they had an opportunity where they were about 2.5 games out of the wild card. They traded Trey Mancini and they traded Jorge Lopez. And at the time, it seemed like the right deal, right? Where it's like, you know, you're moving, you're acquiring pieces. But now you look at the Orioles, they made 2 playoff appearances, have no wins to show for it, and are kind of at the back end of their they're supposed to be their golden era, kind of wondering if they should have done more, right? And so I think it's tough to predict what the future brings. But if I'm them, I would definitely keep C.J. Abrams. I think he's performed too well and means too much to the offense to trade him. I honestly would keep Foster Griffin. Like, I think, like, those 2 guys mean a lot to winning. But I think you can trade a guy like a Jacob Young. I think you could trade a guy like a Luis Garcia if you get the right return. And I think you could maybe make some moves on the edges to get some bullpen help, right? I don't think you could go all in, but I think you could at least keep Foster and keep CJ, and at least try to at least make a run at this. Like, I just don't know if you know how many chances you're going to get. I think it's worth it just for the fan base and for the clubhouse. Like, give them an opportunity to experience winning baseball. Like, I think that has to matter at some point, right? You can't just like be like, oh, we'll do it next year. We'll do it next year. It's like the fans want something to believe in. So I think you have to value that at some point.
Well, and I think, you know, part of that is, and you alluded to it, is, you know, when you're having a season that's obviously much better than expected, the downer of trading a Foster Griffin and even a Luis Garcia at this point, because they did trade Curtis Mead. I actually now think if you traded Garcia, you're kind of threatening that dominant offensive team that you have. That would be a big part of why you can make a run to a playoff spot. But my God, can you imagine if they traded C.J. Abrams after this? It would be an absolute deflating thing for the rest of the clubhouse, don't you think?
I completely agree. Like, I think you can explore a CJ trade at some point in the off season, and maybe it won't be as deflating as of a blow, because it's like you start spring training fresh and that's what you have. But like, to do it at this point, I mean, CJ, one of the things that I really appreciate about CJ this year is he seems more bought into what the team is doing and seems more bought into his teammates. And I think there's just a cohesiveness that CJ kind of adds to the clubhouse in a way that not that he hasn't done that in seasons prior, but it's just been more heightened this year. And I think the trade CJ would just be a really tough look, I think, for the sake of the organization, what they're trying to build and that culture they're trying to build. Like, I just think it'd be really tough to trade CJ at this point, because he just means so much to their offense. It's just like, you know, like the way he's able to drive in runs, like he's a threat in a way that, you know, James Wood's obviously a threat, right? But to have CJ in that 4 spot, like that strikes fear, I think, into a lot of lineups. And I think that I agree with your point. Like, I think that the lineup would be a lot less potent if you trade Luis Garcia. Like, Curtis Mead was like pushing it, right? But like trading Luis Garcia, I think would be tough, because like Luis hit 23 homers. Like, you'd be essentially looking for your power production from essentially just James Wood and CJ Abrams, and that'd be kind of tough, right? And so I think it'd be tough to trade Luis Garcia. I could still see it, but I do think it would definitely take a hit on their offense for sure.
So let's just talk about Foster Griffin in a little bit more depth. Where do you think the nature of any sort of contract extension, where are those talks right now? What do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where they're at. Like you see conflicting reports that, you know, like that's fizzled out, but you also see reports that like they're still considering an extension. So I think it's interesting, right? Like, if you can't give an extension, you could easily make the argument that you want to trade him. But at the same time, there's a potential that if you go all the way to the end of the season, you could potentially send him a qualifying offer. And if he doesn't sign with you, then you can get a compensatory pick, which in theory would be like a 2nd-round pick next year. And obviously, for how much the team is talking about how they want their drafting development to be a big deal, I think that's really valuable to have that 50th pick. And so I think there's a lot of options out there. I guess my thought is I would try to see if you could extend them. And if not, like, I still think it makes sense to keep them, because in theory, you know, Foster Griffin came from Japan, had a lot of success this year. And so I think if you keep him to the end of the year, in theory, you could make the argument to him, like, hey, you had a lot of success here and a lot of continuity here. Like, you can continue to build that here. And I think that could be something that might be worth considering. I think the other interesting thing, too, when it comes to Foster Griffin, is I don't exactly know what the contract and what his market will look like. I think when I talk to people about what his market would look like, I think Seth Lugo is the guy that comes to mind. He signed a 2-year, $45 million contract a couple years ago, but he was about 6 years older than Foster Griffin's at right now. And so it's just interesting to see what his market will be. But I can't imagine it'll be anything more than like 2 to 3 year contract anywhere between like $30 to $50 million. So, I don't know. It should be interesting to see what his market is. If he feels like he can test the market and get more, then I could get why he'd go for it. But also at the same time, like I think it's a reasonable contract for the Nationals to do, especially with money coming off the books this year. With Strasburg coming off the books, Trevor Williams, like they have money to spend, I think.
How much irony would it be? And I'm not suggesting there would be a lot of it, but it's just a gut feel for a heavy analytics-based front office to decide to pass up on perhaps, a reasonable package of future prospects for a 30 to 31-year-old pitcher who basically can't throw over 90 miles per hour and is truly an old school pitcher, right?
Yeah. I mean, it would be hilarious at the same time. Like, it would speak to the fact that, like, Paul Saboni isn't just approaching this from an analytical perspective. He's trying to also balance feel as well. And I think that is pretty significant to try to balance, like, feel and also, like, what the numbers say, right? And so, like, I do think you can't just base things off of, like, what a computer says. Like, you do it to have some feel. Now, it should help and guide your thinking for sure, but it can't be the end-all, be-all. And so I do think it would be hilarious if it panned out that way. But also, like, I think it would be a good sign that, like, they're not just making everything based off of an analytical decision, but they are using it to help inform their decisions. But, like, that's not going to be the end-all, be-all. And so, like, I'm interested to see what they do, right? Like, but it would be hilarious, right? Where it's like the guy they give a contract out to doesn't throw faster than 92, 93. Like, you would think that'd be like the last thing that you would be trying to sign.
Yeah, truly an old school, father's pitcher's pitcher, not what, most people are looking for today. By the way, one last thing just on last night. That was a tough night for Dylan Cruz. And he's given us some reasons to believe this year, in recent weeks. But that was a brutal couple of at-bats when he had an opportunity with runners in scoring position. Just seems too impatient to me. What about you?
Yeah, like there are stretches where Dylan seems really locked into his approach, especially against, like, if you look at his stats, like, he's crushing left-handed pitching. Like, I don't know if you look at the difference, but he's almost like a 900 OPS against lefties. And then righties is like 650. And so when you look at him and his approach, it's very clear that he has a good feel for what pitchers are trying to do to him, what his eyesights are when it comes to lefties. But righties, it feels like he's still trying to figure it out. There's some at bats where, like, it looks like he has everything down pat. And then the next at bat, he swings at 2 sliders away. It's very clear that, like, breaking balls away is if you're going to get him, that's how you kind of approach it. And so, like, I think it's just a matter of, like, honing in his approach and just not getting too aggressive in those key moments, if that makes sense. And I think you see some of that. You see some moments where, like, he's very patient. He slows the game down. He's worked some walks. There was a stretch where he was walking over the past 2 weeks. That was pretty impressive. And then another
last
week will go
night,
by
not very patient.
Yeah, last night he wasn't patient, right? And so I think it's just kind of like the growing pains and the learning curves. It's just like, how quickly can he nip that in the bud? And I think, like, that's going to remain to be seen. I think that will be the key to his development. Is, like, is he swinging the pitches that he knows he can hit, or is he getting a little bit too aggressive? I think that's kind of the bottom line, and I think it's going to be a push and pull for a while as he tries to navigate that.
I got 20 seconds, but I forgot to ask you, what did you think of Jake Irvin in his return?
There were a lot of hard hit balls for sure. Like, I think that was pretty notable. Like, a lot of balls hit the warning track, but I mean, he kept them in the game. I think that's all you can ask for. Obviously, James Wood kind of misplayed that one ball in right field that led to the 2-run homer. But I think that, like, from the peripheral numbers, like, it wasn't like maybe his best showing in the sense that the Braves had a lot of hard hit balls. But at the same time, like, he would have allowed one run had it not been for that. And so I think, like, it's a step in the right direction, obviously. And obviously you got to take it with a grain of salt that he's still working his way back. But I think there were things to like and things not to like. And I think it's just a matter of, can he hone in that consistency and figure out his exact mix and kind of get back to the pitcher he was right before he went down with the injury.
Great job, Andrew. Thanks for being available. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yep, Andrew Golden from the Baltimore Banner, at Andrew C. Golden on X. Chris is next. Have a good weekend.